Sorry about that. Hello, and welcome to the Virtual Hammer Museum. I'm Claudia Bester. I'm the director of the Hammer's public programs, and I want to welcome you all to tonight's conversation with artists Christina Quarles and Miguel. Before we start, I have just a quick note for the audience. Please note this program is being recorded and will be available later on the Hammer website. The program's a Zoom webinar, so we can see your names and anything you type into the chat or the Q&A boxes. And we'd love for you all to introduce yourselves in the chat box, and feel free to talk with each other there. And the Q&A box is where you type in questions you have for our guest speakers. So on to our speakers. Christina Quarles is a Los Angeles-based artist whose multiracial identity informs her practice, with bodies, subjectivity, and ambiguity all apparent in her lush paintings. She was born in Chicago and raised here in Los Angeles. She completed her undergrad at Hampshire College with a double concentration in philosophy and studio arts, and then earned her Master of Fine Arts in painting and printmaking from Yale University in 2016. Christina currently has solo exhibitions at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago and at the X Museum in Beijing, and she has an upcoming solo exhibition at the South London Gallery in June. Christina was one of the featured artists in the Hammer Museum's 2018 biennial Made in LA, and she currently lives and works in Altadena, California. Miguel is a singer, songwriter, producer, and all-around Renaissance man, also from Southern California. Over the last decade, Miguel has established himself as an artist who is unafraid to follow his creative impulses wherever they may lead him. His music is deeply influenced by his Mexican and African-American roots, and his lyrical, lush, award-winning music pushes the boundaries of R&B. His Grammy award-winning song Adorn went double platinum, and he's had 12 songs so far on the Billboard Hot 100. As the recipient of 10 Grammy nominations, it's no surprise that his last two albums debuted at #1 on Billboard's R&B albums chart. He also has hit collaborations with Mariah Carey, Usher, J. Cole, Travis Scott, and ASAP Rocky, among others. Last month, he collaborated with reggaeton producer Tiny on the single Sunbathe, and his new EP that just came out 2 weeks ago is called Art Dealer Chic Volume 4. Miguel is also an activist who's used his platform to speak out against mass incarceration and inhumane immigrant detention centers. And tonight, he and Christina Quarles will talk not only about their work as artists, but also about maintaining mental health in the current tumultuous moment of history. So please join me in welcoming Christina Quarles and Miguel. Hi, welcome.
Hi. How are you?
Excellent. How you guys doing? Christina, I love your shirt.
Thank you. It's like from Lauren Halsey from Made in LA 2018. So I figured I'd, rep the Hammer a little bit. Your shirt's cool too. What's the whole thing say?
This is destroy systemic racism. Kind of did this like to benefit Build Power as like a sort of a pre-drop. Actually made this so kind of cool.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah,
so,
thank you so much.
What's that?
I said thank you for making time. I've been a fan for a long time. The introduction I think was perfect, especially in describing all of the things that I love about your work, and especially the ambiguity in the bodies and the color and fluidity. Always inspired. So I'm just I'm really happy.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm super excited to also be chatting with you because I've been also a fan of yours for a while. It's funny, like in grad school, because when you're an artist, you like a painter, you basically are just alone in your studio all the time. So you'd have to like listen to music to feel like you're not completely crazy. But in grad school, I was like listening to your album Wild Heart like on repeat. So this is very like full circle. I'm like, that's where I was coming up with these ideas. Like, listening to, like your music and like, that song Flesh is like, I would just like sometimes just listen to that on repeat. So yeah, maybe that had like some influence in all the like fleshy squishiness of the bodies.
I love it. What a trip. And to hear about music being a part of your process actually is as always, like I think about just creating and how sort of mediums kind of really do, kind of push into each other the way like an artery does. I was reading something about the kidney. For whatever reason, I've just been like, I can't get enough of like UFC, and for some reason I was just they're talking about body shots, and someone hits the body, but I think art very much is like that. You know, it's serves a purpose in humanity and culture, and when a force in that artery in general kind of pushes or pulsates, the opposite end sort of reacts to that. And
Yeah.
so in the very same way, you know, your art inspires a lot of what I do, and it's
Oh,
actually really cool to hear that it works the opposite way too. It's really dope.
yeah. No, totally. I mean, I always think about how, like, as artists, it's, I mean, kind of the amazing thing is that you have this skill set. Oh, this is like, if you hear anything, it's just my dog like scratching herself and being a mess. But yeah, the way that, like, as artists, we just get to kind of have all this input of information, and then we go do whatever our practice is, like whatever it is that we specifically have been practicing for, like, you know, basically usually since we were like little kids, right? And it's like this skill set, but it's combined with this sort of this history of having practiced a skill, but then you're always responding to sort of the immediacy of like everything from like what you see on your way to the studio, whether it's like the music studio or the painting studio. And like, it's just like, it's amazing, I think, to be able to sort of have all of that going into you. And then you get to the studio and you're like, how am I going to have this go through this, like, actually kind of formal skill that I've been practicing forever?
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of the way that things evolve as we're being influenced is probably one of the most interesting things, especially about the past year. Because I mean, how could we not evolve in some way, shape, or form? You know, I mean, you know, as you're saying, you know, even if it's subconscious, we pick up on things, whether it's like advertisement or you know, someone on the street, or some, you know, or an emotion you hear in a song or a conversation you had, and so on and so forth. I'm curious as to like how and what maybe, you know, has been pushing on you, because there's things that like my whole perspective is like shifted in a lot of ways in the past year. I mean, down to
for sure.
I'm curious, like if there's anything that just like that's been grabbing you.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I don't know. I've been kind of like, I mean, for many reasons, I kind of am like, I wish that this pandemic had like ended like 3 months earlier. Because I feel like 3 months ago, I was very much like, had like a full sort of cycle of how I had developed. Because it was this sort of like, at the beginning, I mean, I had all these shows that were going to be happening, and I had just come back from London, and I was going to be traveling to like a million places this year. And then all of a sudden, like I was working on my Chicago show, and all of a sudden it was like all flights canceled, all talks canceled. And I was like, well, actually, like, I'm so stressed out that this is kind of a relief that I get to like stay in one place, even though these things I've been working so hard on are now like maybe not even going to happen. But it was this moment of being like, I've been working so hard and so fast for so long that this is like, I know, I think in like our culture, it's like this idea that you have to just keep escalating, keep working harder and harder. And there's kind of not really a lot of explanation for how you then rest and sustain in that mode. It's kind of like, I don't know, I've been working on this like kind of like, I gotta hustle because this might be my last chance kind of. And so, and I think we kind of equate slowing down with failure or with like not being successful. So this was like on a global scale, like, okay, I am slowing down and it's not my fault. It has nothing to do with my career, my success or anything. But like, so that was my immediate sort of feeling of like, wow, I've been moving so quickly and I didn't even have a second to realize how messed up it was in a way. And then like, there was stuff next. I'm curious, like, what was your sort of like initial, like March 2020 vibes?
A year ago. You know what? I was already in like trying to. I was in rev up mode, and we'd been like prepping for getting some of the ideas and the things we were creating out. And I was like, all right, let's go. It's, you know, it's time to push the, you know, ball up the hill and like try and build momentum. And then, and I was in the studio heavy, and I'll never forget. I think it was I was at East West Studios here in in Hollywood, and we were all kind of like watching the news and updating each other, from different rooms, because there's a common area, and you go into the kitchen, and everyone's like, hey, like, are you hearing about this thing? I'm like, yeah, we're kind of seeing it on social media, and it's weird. I don't think it'll last too long, but
Right.
it's crazy. And it was like, yeah, we got to close the studio, so all sessions canceled,
Yeah.
and then just going home and being like, well, okay,
Right.
what would it last, like a couple months, a month,
Yeah.
maybe like a month.
Right.
And after the first 2 months, it was like, nah, this is gonna go. So I kind of leaned into it, and to your point, in the same way, I was actually really, after getting comfortable with like just accepting it,
Mhm.
which I've been working on for a long time. I just flow with things, sometimes you just can't force things. And
Right.
if the whole world, especially if the whole world is like, if it's all
Yeah.
slowing down, you just kind of got to just let it wash over. And I kind of just stopped. I stopped
Yeah.
and just kind of was like, let me just be a sponge, accept how I feel, accept all of the devastation, because there's a lot of, just a lot of emotion, like people actually losing their lives, and
Yeah.
they're trying to manage it by not like staying too glued to the TV and the news, which is a
Right.
challenge, But after that, then it was just like, let's have fun. So there was like moments, like peaks and
Yeah.
valleys. It was like, slow down. All right, well, cool. We're just gonna have fun, just chill and wait this out a little bit. And then it was like, oh no, we can't go anywhere. It was a sad
Right.
point. And because we live in LA, it was like, well, great. I have weed, and that's perfectly legal, so I'm gonna enjoy that.
Right.
And
Be
try to,
outside, 72
yeah,
degrees.
watch as many movies, and and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But yeah, it definitely was a interesting year.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like there definitely was that sort of like, I don't know, peaks and valleys of the quarantine of like, and it felt too like every time I sort of was like, okay, I've got a handle on like what my daily routine is with staying indoors, it would just be like the news would just be so crazy, so devastating. And then of course, like the summer with just like, suddenly it was like people being like, okay, all of the things that we know are, well, that many of us know have been true for a long time. And then, the first like several months of the pandemic were very clear, like, okay, yeah, there's like, there's issues dealing with class, with race, with equity that are going on in this country that have been going on forever. But you throw a pandemic in on it, and you throw like, at-home education in on it, and then you're still like having police brutality with it. And you're just like,
Oh,
okay, like this is like, we can't do this anymore. And like, so it felt like there was a sort of like, I don't know, almost this kind of like everything was still bubbling under the surface up until like Memorial Day. And then it was just like, it was like you kind of couldn't turn away after that point. So it felt like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm sure that this isn't like new stuff for you. I know it wasn't new for me, but it was this suddenly like, again, it was that sort of global reckoning that I felt like was such a thing, like so kind of emotionally taxing to like kind of go through that, with everybody suddenly being like, I've never thought about this before. Like, what do we do about racism? And it's like, well, okay, it's a long road.
right. Yeah. And the conversations, I mean, that was actually probably my favorite part, was because it did feel like, like Riptide. I got
Yeah.
caught in a Riptide once when I was younger. We were at the beach every day of the summer. I grew up in,
Classic Southern California.
and I got caught in a Riptide, and I'll never forget the feeling of just relentless, just being hit relentlessly with no mercy. And it, as we were talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, it was locked down. Before that, it was like, and again, I'm from Los Angeles, so anyone who's tuned in, I mean, Kobe is like hero.
Right.
I mean, so it was like Kobe passes, and then this thing, and then George Floyd, and all of the subsequent, just everyone's. It almost just seemed like that same relentless, like, okay, we got to really figure out how to swim parallel right now.
Right. Yeah, I can't fight it.
Yeah. because the shore is close, but if we don't figure out a different approach and trying to fight against it in the ways that, you know, seem like we could tuck it away, you know, because that's what all this is. It's just like everything coming back to the surface. Man, we just end up in the same place. That was a lot. That was a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like, I mean, I kept continually just being so grateful that I had access to making art and to other artists. And I mean, I feel like that's sort of, I don't know, I felt like having all of those conversations that needed to be happening and just having a familiarity with having conversations and figuring out how to sort of like, I don't know, how to sustain these like ongoing problems. Like, again, I guess I keep thinking about this idea of like sustainability, and maybe it's because we're coming out of, like, I don't know, we're hopefully coming out of the lockdown, but like at least vaccines are becoming more available in the United States, and just trying to think about how to like use all the lessons of the last year and to have that be like an actual change rather than just like back to normal, back to work. I guess that's like why like the last 3 months have been such a drag for me, because I'm like, oh no, now everyone figured out like how we're supposed to work in this time. Like, and I still can't go to parties really, but I'm like having to work just as hard as I ever did. And like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like that this last summer was really about seeing these problems that have been sustained for so long, but then it's like, how do we address them in a way that's also sort of this ongoing accountability, this ongoing change, and like, I don't know, like changing sort of the duration of how we respond to things too, I think is important, because you know, before the pandemic, I felt like everything was just reactionary. And I think that's still sort of where we kind of like where our headspace goes to. But it's like, yeah, I've just been trying to think about like how to slow down that duration, or get to tap into some of that like that slowness that was going on last year.
Yeah, I couldn't. I think about it all the time in terms of even myself, like just to be completely honest, like we're still dealing with lots and lots of the same, you know. I think just last week I saw, and it's, you know, it's like, and it's been this way in terms of injustices and things happening. It's just that we have access to proving it, and we can share it instantaneously, but it doesn't make the in-betweens, it doesn't necessarily make it top of mind. And in the same way, I've been thinking of like, why is that? How do I continue to, how do we keep it top of mind but be balanced? And I think that's one thing that I almost feel like, and I hope for the best in this way. I lean towards my cynicism because human beings are creatures of habit, and this stuff has been a part of humanity since the history of, you know, just discrimination towards people who don't look or have or behave or believe, you know, in the same ways. And I do feel like we're sort of in a transition period where we have the opportunity to, you know, maybe grow up a little bit, but I you know, trying to also be balanced with the expectation, you know, it's a trip. And then I always feel like, is it my responsibility to be an escape, or is it my responsibility to address, or is it best to do both? Sometimes I'm a little torn, you know, and I'm sort of curious, like if you have any perspective or you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been, I mean, for me, like my whole journey has been like making art forever, but not really having anybody else look at my art until very recently. I mean, and like I'm like 36, so the last 5 years is really when like people have seen my art in any, like besides my mom and my like classmates. And so it's really been kind of like adjusting to that new pace while also trying to like figure out kind of what that platform holds for me, and like the responsibility of that, and wanting to just also think through like how to sort of bring up the communities and like the opportunities that I was given that allowed me to be where I am today. Because I think that, I mean, I think so much about whatever kind of art you make is ultimately about having the time to practice it. And it's like that time is such a luxury, and it's something that, it can happen with money, but it can also happen from encouragement, from just having like, the space to do that. So there's a lot of ways that you can give people that time, but it's giving people access to that time, I think, earlier on, rather than just trying to let more people like try to diversify like who like the gatekeepers let into like the next level. It's more like, how do we get more people being able to have that dream, or more people being able to, how do we diversify the pool of people that are having that dream as kids, So that's been I've benefited from like this public arts high school in Los Angeles that I got to go to, that allowed me to make my art as a kid for no money at all. But it is hard, because then at the end of the day, I'm like, well, what I know I can do best is my paintings and my art. And it's like wanting to let my art also be able to sort of speak for itself and have an experience that maybe is not tied into like a didactic verbal like that's the whole point of it, right? Is that it's not a statement, it is this sort of experience. And it can be also like the solace for people that have to have those conversations every day, and they want to just look at something or listen to something that's like a way of feeling understood. I don't know. I feel like that's maybe, I guess I see it as having like these parallel practices maybe. So it's like, I don't know, the same way that like my day would not be complete if I was just in the studio painting. I also need to see my friends and hang out with my wife and walk my dog and, I don't know, like listen to music or dance or whatever. Like, it's like all those things make me a better artist, make me a more well-rounded person. And so I feel like it doesn't have to all my activism doesn't have to happen in my art. Sometimes it can happen from like donating money or donating time or, opening up the floor for somebody else to speak. So, yeah. How are you? Like, because I think with music, one of the amazing things about it is that it's just so much more accessible. I feel like, I don't know, I've studied art for a long time, and I still will go into a museum or a gallery and feel like intimidated or like stupid because I don't understand it. I'm like, should I get this work? I don't get this work. And I'm like, I went to like Yale for grad school. Like, I can't be more educated in my field, but I'm still like, I don't remember like the name of that person. Like, but music is like, I never feel stupid when I listen to music. I just feel like I either like it or I don't, like, or I'm like challenged by it, or it's like easy. I don't know. Like, how do you, I guess, sort of use that sort of welcoming and like folding in that music can have? And like, I don't know, are there like lessons that us artists and like art institutions can use to try to make people feel less like intimidated by it?
Man, that is a great question. See, yeah, access is a trippy thing. It kind of also, man, classism, and I think it's has its ways, its roots run deep, and it's made its ways into so many and taken so many forms, right? I think because music sort of, wow, let me really think about this.
Yeah. Well, I guess that like going back to like your original like conversation, because I was just like weaving off in all these directions, but like, because some of your music really does point to these like issues that I can relate to and stuff. Like, I just thinking like, back to like listening to Wildheart in grad school, like you had that song about like not fitting in or like being too much of one thing and like things like that, where it's like, oh yeah, I could tap into that. But then also there's other parts of your music where it's just like, I don't know, it's even just like being able to listen to like sounds and voice and harmony and having different genres coming in there that also is, I don't know, it feels powerful and political without having to actually like spell it out too. But like, how do you relate to that conversation of like how much of your message do you put in the art and how much of it's like next to the art?
It's been such a like process to figure it out. Because I'll be honest with you, just as a human being, I guess my priorities are shifting.
Yeah.
So, with that, there is a bit of like, okay, you know, if my work is a reflection of who I am, and I'm an instrument, if what my soul is telling me is that I care about, you know, A, B, and C, for me not to speak it, you know, there's a lot of consideration, and I've tried it, and when it comes out naturally, I love it. Like I just wrote a song about purchasing my first firearm. I was raised super religiously. I was never like of guns. My mom wouldn't even let me play with toys that look like guns.
Right.
You know? But because of the reality, and you know, we see it every day, my perspective has changed. That song came out. I wasn't trying to say anything about or comment on anything. And I find that maybe it's less about, for me, it's felt more genuine when it's not trying to comment on it.
Right.
And just letting it come out if it comes out. And when that happens, just like that song that you're talking about, that wasn't like, let's write a song about being, you know, of mixed heritage, which we both are. We know how people want you to choose I mean, when we were kids, it was like, are you black? Are you are you Mexican? This is like annual test kind of thing, you know. It's like a question and answer on the daily and like on paper.
Being
So
like multiracial in the 90s was a weird thing to be. Because it was very much like, I don't know, I feel like everything was like about checking off a box and there was no option for that. But also kids, I mean, I think what I liked about that, like kind of the words of that song was that it was really located in childhood too, where I feel like, I mean, that's when I started questioning identity, really was as a kid, because kids are just so like, what are you? Like, that's like what kids say on the playground. They're like, what are you? Like, where's your mom from? Like, that's what they say. And then if they don't, like when I would be like, oh, my dad's black, my mom's white. And they'd be like, no, you're not, like, you're lying. And like, the kids will say that, like adults will say that, like, in complete, like they'll say that, but not say that. But like kids will just say it. And like, but I feel like for me, that really like opened me up to being like, well, okay, I'm not lying, but like my like classmate just told me I was lying. So like, there isn't a box that I can check off on this like standardized test. So like, what is my identity? Like, what is race? And like, it got me thinking about these questions that, you know, I still think about today, I still work through. And ultimately I landed on painting because it's a visual medium. So it doesn't have to like rest in language as much. I mean, it's a visual language, but things can happen simultaneously that are contradictory. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, that's like what was interesting to me about that song was that you had it in childhood. And then also like the idea too, that you were talking about being like too much of something. Like, it wasn't like you weren't enough. It's like you're too much. And that's also something I think about too. It's like, it's not that I'm like not black enough, it's that I'm too white, you know? And like, yeah, but I don't know. I mean, like, I'm very curious just because I always like hearing other people's like experience of being like biracial, mixed race and stuff. Like, what's your connection to that?
I think that's in general, anyone who is ambiguous, you know, in terms, you know, it's like you can't really put your finger on it. We just want to understand things, and when we don't understand things, we're afraid of them. And that's where the whole bias thing, and that's just like, you know, it's like deep, you know, just dumb baggage that we pick up from previous and like weird, you know, the people that we grow up with, and so on and so forth. All that stuff is, I think, across the board. If you talk to anyone who looks racially ambiguous, they're gonna tell you like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you have tons of friends. We have tons of friends that are like, yeah, shit was weird. Excuse me. Yeah. I'm like, hey guys, Hammer. I think across the board, it's just unfortunately that's how we think.
Yeah.
And we've been taught to think of, to identify things and to want to identify them, so then we can, I mean, in this system, in the way that the system works, is really, I think ultimately, and this can go a whole other conversation, but
Right.
again, it's just market system really always ends up being about identifying things so they can be categorized to better market them or to better sell them.
Yeah.
And until you can identify what something is, then you can't really pick it apart and say why someone should purchase it, you know?
Right.
Which is actually why I also, I think, really love your work, is because you judo, are you like, you kind of like really, is that like jujitsu the whole thing, and it's you, it's so you, and it's not trying to be anything. I think we always celebrate artists who are able to really be themselves,
Yeah.
find there's something there that feels like, I know this, but you can't put your finger on it.
Right. Right. I mean, I think that that's like, I don't know. I feel like there's oftentimes like the most pressure to sort of fit into these categories or like be legible. Like we put the most pressure on ourselves to do that just because it's like we want to be understood and we want to fit in. And like, I mean, it's something that I struggle with like a lot of aspects of my identity because it doesn't like, I grew up without a lot of money, but I grew up like next to a lot of money, like in LA. So like I had access to certain things, but, technically didn't have like a ton of money growing up, or like my race, or like even like being queer is like kind of these like it doesn't quite fit into any one category that neatly, but I find that it's like you want to so you can be understood by people. And so I think that like I don't know, one of the things I've tried to tap into with my paintings is really trying to get to, I guess that's kind of like what you're talking about before. It's like when it comes out naturally, when it doesn't feel like it's this sort of like forced statement, but it's actually like you're not like describing the thing, you're actually like it is the thing. And so for me, like with my paintings, I really try to tap into that, like like what is it to be in a racialized body, what is it to be in like a gendered body, a queer body, and like we're all in bodies that are like racialized or gendered. And so for me it's like much more about like the compositions of the body, or like playing with like the edge and the frame and like what it is to sort of know the limits of legibility, but then to still like have agency and like activation and freedom within that. So it's like, but it's not like actually like literally like, I don't know, like this is one of my paintings behind me. It's like, there's no like actual skin color. It's like raw canvas, which I guess you could say is like Caucasian, but it's not, it's just raw canvas. It's like an absence of paint. But there's like pinks and yellows and like crazy colors, fuchsias and grays. So I feel like, yeah, as like artists, it's like you can talk about something and really get to like kind of like the soul of it or like the meat of it without kind of getting to like the didactics of it.
Yeah, that's probably what really also draws me to your work, is that it's more the emotion, and I think it is also the movement. I feel so much movement in each one. It's, obviously it's framed, but the movement is what really grabs. So it you never really need to know what the forms are. You feel what they are, so you don't really question. And that's the thing about humanity, like humanity is the race, right? It's human race, right? So when you feel something, that's the thing about, I think, a big difference, back to your question, between sort of the accessibility of music, is that it's music as a communicator, was never about this part.
Right. Yeah.
Get down, let me try to understand. It was never like a textbook thing. It was like, if you feel it,
Right.
people feel it, and it grabs people. I mean, obviously over time, it's become a business and so on and so forth.
Right. Sure.
But great music stands the test of time, and that's the emotion, that's the soul part. And I think that's maybe the difference in accessibility, is that there are really heady, I mean, to your point, I definitely walk into the hammer. And I'm like, I don't get this blank canvas or just all black, or you know what I mean? It's like I'm trying to understand the statement. Not to point out any artists or their work, all respect. But I think there's there's a certain intellectual approach that is valuable, especially in terms of preservation, and especially of technique and execution and qualities that are valuable. But I do think that sort of the things that are celebrated and most timeless in music, I think, always end up being like really, they hit you right here.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's like, I mean, because ultimately it is this thing that then you can also interact with this expression of like movement and dance and like, I don't know, it's just it can reach you on a more physical level, where I feel like with art, I mean, some of the work that I was able to get into when I was younger was always like installation based or sculptural or things where I could really feel my body in the work. And actually like painting is kind of like the last type of art that I like, even though it's what I make. Because I like making paintings because I can be physical making it. But I try to have some of that awareness of your own body when you look at one of my paintings. But I think it's just, it's helpful to kind of just get out of your own head. I feel like to think, to actually be able to think, it's like you kind of need to take sort of like all of your learning and language kind of out of the equation, and then you can actually kind of have that conversation about what it's about, And music, it's just a medium that gets you there really quickly.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is like the greatest, I think, understood how important it was to make the technique of things, the ability, second nature, right? And that's where, like, just our first conversation just over the phone, one of the things that you said was like, I just need to do my work.
Right.
I think a real artist really has an affinity for that, because we understand the value of repetition, learning, technique, how that ends up translating so that you don't have to think when you're doing your work.
Right. Yeah.
So you're able to flow and it comes through you, and that's like the real work of an artist, is like, just how can I get what is here or right here? How do I somehow transmute that into something that other people can see or feel, or that's I think it's so clear in your works. Like I just like it. That's why I'm like, I don't own one yet. When I could own one, I'm gonna own one.
We'll talk. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Like that's what makes art. I mean, it's something that I keep thinking about when I think about like kind of what's the political power of art. And I feel like it's ultimately that it's so process based, and it's so in like the process of making and then the process of experiencing it, whether it's, listening to it or moving through it or looking at it. But it's ultimately this unfolding that can happen in a way it's not completely linear. It's not completely like, it's not just saying a statement, because as soon as you say a statement or attach words to it that are literally trying to describe it, it's like, I don't know. So when you try to like describe a dream after you wake up, it's like it makes you forget it by trying to talk about it. You're like, it's not quite it. And it's like, I feel like that's the power of art, is not thinking of it as this like static object or like, this static thing, but that it actually is something that has a different duration. And I feel like that's something maybe that I was trying to like pick up on earlier with this idea of like, what are we going to be once we like get out of lockdown? And I think it's like, I don't know, just changing our duration to things, having it not be so much like, or even like, the response to George Floyd over the summer and people being like, people trying to be like, how do I come out as anti-racist? And it's like, well, you could say that, but then it's like a process. It's like a lifelong process. It's like working over and over again. And it's like, I think that art kind of helps tap people into that process that's sort of not fully in like an articulatable kind of language, but it's more through this like, because you're doing something technical, but this sort of like subconscious is flowing through your technical skill.
I think that's also why on the opposite end, why art and visual art is still a haven. Like I love art for the fact that it's protected in that way, that technique, true, you know, not just the talent, but like all the things that go into really making art. It's not like something you can just go like buy. There's no plug-in for that. You know what I mean? It's like, and for those of, it's like, you can't just, it's just like music is almost lost its value because it's so easily created, so easy to manufacture. I mean, you don't even have to buy music anymore.
Yeah.
So on the opposite end of what I was saying before, I think there's always that interesting balance where, I love the accessibility. I don't like so much the accessibility.
Right.
So it's like finding that balance. And then to your point, like what you're saying in terms of making sure things become more consistent and not just like moments and blips.
Yeah.
Caring about, human life and justice and fairness and equality. If that's not just like a quick moment, that is just something that becomes the standard. I hope is something we find more equilibrium with time. I hope, I think your work, I think when I look at your work, I think it's that kind of work that helps bring people together in that way. And that's what I hope music, I love music that does that. I strive to create music that brings people together,
Yeah.
Then we start to realize the humanity. I am not female. I'm not queer. I'm not, you know what I mean? But I identify with the soul in your music. Excuse me, in your work. See, there's no difference. It's just art. Totally. It's soul. It's just different expressions of it.
Yeah.
That's humanity.
One of the things that I find is really interesting, and that, like, I'll talk to students about sometimes, but like this idea that, I don't know, you'd think that in order to appeal to a broader audience, you'd have to be like really general. But I found that it's actually like whenever you're super specific, like you're highly specific about your own experience, your own interests, and you actually like think about it beyond sort of like the cliches or like I don't know. I was in this artist residency in Maine in 2016 called Skowhegan. And this one artist had this project where he had us all send in, like, because like artists always have artist statements. And so we all sent in like 200 words of our artist statement. And then he'd read them all in a row and they all sounded the exact same. It was like the same words over and over again. And like from that point on, I was like, okay, it's really important to be way more specific with my experience. It's like once I tapped into that specificity, it seems like that's actually kind of strangely like when it could be tapped into more universally. It's like somehow that's when people are like, oh wait, I feel that, like I get that experience. And like I think that's kind of it's not what you would think. You'd think that by being super specific you'd alienate everybody, but it's actually like I found that those moments of like high specificity, people are like, oh yeah, me too, that's how I feel.
Man, one of my favorite, and you just said it, that because you realize that we're not so different,
right?
Like, oh, whatever we think is different, not the human, like we feel the same, we feel the same things, we go through these emotions, right? One of my favorite things, I don't know if I said this, but one of my mentors, Mark Pitts, he said great songs are great songwriting, but I think this applies across the board to your point, is other people seeing themselves in your details. So I guess in the same way, like you said, the more specific, the more detailed and clear about your POV, your perspective, right? You are, I think people start to feel like, oh yeah, I feel that too. I see that too. Maybe a little different way, but a version of it that's, we're not so different. I guess that's the whole purpose of art, I guess,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely like what can be really powerful about it, and like why I guess I get bummed out sometimes that visual arts can feel like a little standoffish or inaccessible to certain people, because I feel like the power of it is that it actually is something that can position a lot of different people in a conversation that they maybe like wouldn't have, or like wouldn't have maybe like the tools to have, but it like, yeah, it creates this sort of common ground to start talking about things and start processing other feelings that maybe, or like thoughts or ideas that would be difficult to imagine, or even like your conversation to have otherwise. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, it's something that I see in art. It can be hard because you sometimes get caught up in like being like, well, I don't get it. Should I get this? Like, or like, I could make this, like my kid could make this, like that kind of thing. But that's like when you think of it as like an object, but it's like if you actually like sit in front of it and like experience it and try to experience it more the way like you experience music or dance or like any other form of more physical art, you can actually like, I think, start to tap into that conversation because you aren't worried about being wrong. It's like there's nothing wrong about it. It's just like, I don't know, do you feel it or do you not?
Right. I'm curious. Should we jump into questions?
Yeah, why not?
Man, I don't know how to do that, but
I think someone's gonna pop in. We'll see. Yeah.
Hi, I'm gonna pop in. Thank you guys so much. This has been so much fun. I'm such a huge fan of both of your work, but now I feel like we're BFFs and we're just hanging out on the couch. Like we should have a pizza. And you guys don't know who the heck I am, but I feel like we're all friends now. So thank you. It's really fun. It's one of the things I love about Zoom. It's so intimate.
Right. I know you get to see all your puppy in the background. And
so we do have a lot of audience questions, and I'm going to read some of them to you and you can respond. Some of them are more personal. Some of them are sort of global. I'll start out with a sort of fun, personal one. Bianca Zelaya asks if you revisited or picked up any new hobbies during the pandemic. She started roller skating, and I want to make it just a quick side note that World on Wheels in LA, which is the amazing roller rink that I go to, that Nipsey Hussle revitalized. They just closed because of losing business during COVID. And so if there's any billionaire roller skaters out there in the audience, please come save World on Wheels.
yeah.
And also Skateland in Northridge. But anyway, did you guys do anything fun like that during COVID?
Think about it.
Ooh, new hobbies. Man, I wouldn't say new. I probably ran through like so many video games, way more than I could. I try my best to stay away from them because when I start, it's like there's no stopping. That's it. It's like I am locked into a video game. So I ran through like the entire Resident Evil franchise through COVID in about a month. I don't know. It was bad.
I feel like I did like the opposite end of that spectrum, which is that like I didn't learn how to read in COVID, but I definitely like was not a reader my whole life. And then I feel like what I did is I got a waterproof Kindle so I could like read it in the bath. And then it suddenly like, and then also I got a library card where you can like get free ebooks sent over to the Kindle. So I was set, but also I kind of realized that like, I always thought that to read meant that you had to read something like really complicated or hard, but then I was like, oh, you can just read trash. And so like, I just read like trashy novels. And I was like, and I look smart because I'm reading, but I'm actually like basically watching stupid TV.
The Kindle, waterproof Kindle with the library card is a life hack.
Yeah, it really is. It's like a little bit of investment up front for the Kindle, but really makes up for it with all the free library books and magazines.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the public libraries. They saved my life during COVID, and they're about to reopen for in-person visits as well.
Ooh, exciting.
Going to a library is nothing like that to this day.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Literally grew up in the Inglewood Library, for real.
Librarians are everything. They also tend to be very progressive and radical. I love them.
Yeah. Yeah, I did not grow up in Beverly Hills. I grew up like mid-city, but my mom would always like drive us to the Beverly Hills Library. She was like, I got us a library card for the Beverly Hills Library. That was like our like fancy afternoons.
That's sick.
She'd be like, it's fine, we got cards. I
Oh,
don't,
That's a
can
great
anyone
lead in.
get a library card anywhere? I'll Google it. Don't worry about it.
yeah, I actually don't know. I don't know. I've been wanting to go to the library downtown. I haven't been in so long.
Oh yeah, that's a nice one. It's like
That's
all underground.
yeah, yeah. I feel like it's like secret corridors in certain places. You feel like if I pull a book from somewhere, maybe a door open. I don't know. It's kind of
Yeah, exactly. That was like me as a little kid. I was always like, I'm gonna find the like hidden book of spells that like witch left in this library. Like, I never found it.
me neither.
That
Right.
building is so beautiful too. But that's a good lead into the next question, which is from Holly Nicholas. Because you mentioned your mom taking you to the library. And Holly Nicholas asks, how important was having your family's support in your decisions to become artists?
Well, do you want to go first or should I?
I feel like I took either way, but I took the last one first. I was like, I'll give it
All
to
right,
you.
I'll take this one first. I would say it was very important for me. I mean, my family was very supportive of me making art. And yeah, like my cousin would give me like drawing lessons for birthday gifts. He'd be like, I'll teach you how to draw faces for your birthday. And like, that's how I learned how to draw faces. And yeah, so it was definitely something I grew up around. And like, I don't know, I definitely, like, I hear stories from people that are like, oh, I never like met a living artist, or like, it never occurred to me that I could be an artist. And so I think that like a big part of, you know, achieving things or having access to things is having just that ability to have that dream even. And like, even though no one in my family was an artist for a living, and I definitely like, I mean, I kept on my side job as a graphic designer all through grad school and post grad school, because I was like, I don't know if I'll ever make money doing this, but yeah, I was definitely like, I might not make money doing it, but I can still always do it. So that was really important to me. But yeah, what about you?
In the same way that book, The Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about sort of the luck in having either being in a place where whatever it is the person grew up to be, they just had a head start. So, you know, like a Bill
Right.
Gates, you know, grew up in Silicon Valley and they happen to have one of the only computers in California, let alone like the entire West Coast at this college that he could go to, community college. Like, if that's not a head start, yeah, I mean, I don't know what is, right? So, and we've seen sort of where he's gone with it. I guess in the same way, I got lucky because I had family that was like, no, you really can sing and you really can dance, and like you could be that, you could do that, like, and encouraging.
Mhm.
I think it's sort of I always say that we were not rich at all. I grew up in the projects, and when I was staying at my grandmother's house in Inglewood, we were at the library all the time because it was like a couple blocks away, and that area is not really, you know, wasn't a lot of money there. We certainly were not, you know, I wouldn't say middle class family, but you know, everyone may do. But what we did have was a support system, and so I would say in the same way, you know, just those little things. It's a trip how when you're a kid, that little push or belief or the lesson or
Yeah.
you know really it changes the altitude by which you can, you know,
Mhm.
what the possibilities of your dreams. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like that, like, that's the thing. It's like equity really needs to start like with kids. Cause it's like, I mean, that's like me too. Like I had a leg up because I was taking art classes at Barnsdale Junior Art Park in Hollywood as a kid. And that's like when I got put into like this figure drawing, like this adult figure drawing class when I was 12. So now I've like, you know, I'm 36, but I've been drawing with live nude models for like the last 24 years. Like that's a lot of time. Some people are starting now. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's this thing that keeps, you know, keeps like white supremacy, keeps the patriarchy alive, is like this idea that there's like geniuses that are born. And it's like, I'm not like a genius. I just am somebody that had access to art lessons as a kid and kept doing it because I liked it. And so I developed that skill. So now I can do it without thinking about it. And it's like by doing it and not thinking about all the technical stuff, because that's just second nature for me, that allows like the creative ideas to flow through, like we were talking about. But that's not like, I mean, that was just happening to be in art classes because my mom needed childcare and being like art classes, science classes. Sometimes you're just after school playing with like the handball, like whatever we got to do to keep you like watched by some adult.
Right. Safe. Safe.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like when you give people that encouragement or even just like that time to practice or learn skills like younger, it's like then when they're in their 20s, it's like they know it.
Yeah.
They put in those like 10,000 hours they talk about.
Right, exactly. More.
I was talking this week to Mr. Wash, who's this amazing artist who's in our current Made in LA biennial at the Hammer Museum. And he said basically what you just said, that children need three things, in his opinion, to grow mentally. And one was just a space where they can hear themselves think, like a quiet space to go after school where it's not filled with people and noise and television or whatever. Access to some kind of a library, and then parental support, and makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Anyway, if I may move on to a new question, which I think is a great question. Rachel Gibbons asks for both of you, are there any other artistic mediums that you each want to explore?
Photography for me. Photography and filmmaking for sure. Hands down.
Nice. I would actually really like to learn some sort of musical instrument. I mean, I'm not at all musically minded.
What would you play?
But I don't know. I mean, I feel like my wife has a guitar, so maybe a guitar because it's just at my house.
I mean, there.
I just feel like it would turn into like some other part of my brain. It's like art was always how I would relax, and now it's like my job. I still relax doing it, but it's like now I need like an extra hobby to hang out with.
It's true. And they say it's like new languages, like they say that when you learn a new language, and obviously we're talking about like spoken language, that when you really learn it, you dream differently. So word association and you know, whatever visual.
Cool.
But I would assume that in the same way that when you learn a new, you know, instrument or creative, you dream differently in your other, what's it called? It makes total sense. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
I know when I started photography, it changed my songwriting because I pay attention to details differently.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you ever like incorporate like I guess you probably did. I was looking at I don't have your like new vinyl record, but it seems like
I got you.
a nice photo.
I didn't take it.
Classic photo,
No.
but I didn't do that one. Because you're in it.
That was Wyatt. No, Wyatt is brilliant. He's incredible. Wyatt Troll. He's brilliant. His eye is amazing, and also very just like I find photography and great photographers are just such like they're just quiet, and because they're just paying the best attention. They pay the best attention, you know, and
The details.
yeah, they're catching those little moments, and also the timing. I think that to catch something in its time, you're almost imagining what it will be before it happens. So you catch it, you know? That's
Yeah. You can anticipate it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
You must know a lot of photographers, I would assume. Just because I imagine that like your career has like a lot of interplay with people that are, you know, making music videos or photographing you for albums or magazine spreads. Like,
Yeah.
You probably get to hang out with a lot of people that could be like
A lot of good ones. Yeah. Actually, I mean, in the same way, though, I would imagine that you actually know a lot of photographers as well, because
oh yeah,
a lot of painters, you're not painting from photography. This is like here.
Yeah, it's all in my brain.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I know a lot of, I went to grad school with a lot of photographers, and yeah, it's definitely like I have such a hard time that's like the type of art where I'm always like, oh, I feel like I don't understand this. But then I see a photograph where I'm like, oh, I get it.
Nailed it. You're like, they nailed it. So this is what's gonna happen. Christina's gonna learn guitar, and I'm gonna photograph her, and it'll be her. That's how we'll make it up.
My new album.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, oh no, I need to stick to painting.
I would definitely buy that album in a heartbeat. So that kind of brings up the question of obstacles. So I think this is kind of a good question for you guys. Alicia asks, did you have any creative blocks due to COVID? And I'm going to add on to that question. Can you talk about how, as artists, having an obstacle might actually help you be more creative?
Well, let's see, obstacles. I mean, I feel like for me, it was just, I was surprised at how hard it was for me to get into the studio and paint, because like at the time my studio was just this little 2-car garage behind my house. And I mean, I have a studio manager, but I don't have anyone that like makes my paintings for me, or like some big crazy production thing that I need. So I actually was like really well set up to make work in COVID, because I'm always just by myself in the studio. But it was really hard to make work because it was so like mentally distracting, and like yeah, there was just so much pain and chaos and so much going on that I found it really difficult to work at first. And then once I kind of was able to like, I guess for me, it was really about making work just for the pure joy of making it and thinking through making, rather than being like, I don't know, I think one of the big problems at the beginning of COVID was people being like, I need to be productive, you know, like constantly thinking about how to produce. And for me, it was like, I don't know, looking kind of at the limitations of my sort of surroundings, working in a smaller space, which I find actually as an artist is like, I don't know, I feel like you also are always kind of marking success by going like bigger studio, bigger canvases. And like, I actually learn a lot from sometimes scaling down. So I had moved into a tinier studio on purpose to like, just be able to be closer to my work, just make one painting at a time, and like slow down that process. So I don't know, I found that sort of like physical closeness to my work was really an interesting thing. And then to just have like nobody coming in and out of my studio other than like my like little 6-person pod I basically like bunked in with and started living with. But yeah, I think that was the biggest obstacle really, though, was just kind of reconciling this, like, I don't know, this sort of physical serenity and this mental, like projected digital chaos, and trying to like make sense of those two things happening at the same time.
In that same way, like, yeah, that the feeling like there's something needs to be said, something needs to be done. Probably because of just the like, that's how we've been sort of interfacing with reality. I have, at least, you know, it's like you have to produce, you have to continue. And I'd actually sat out, I haven't put out an album for like 3 years, so it was absolutely time, you know. And this is like before COVID hit, so
Right.
it was like, I have to get stuff done. But and then it became that quote, oh my goodness, please, I cannot believe I'm not remembering. I need to eat a little, so
Yeah, I know, it's like dinner time.
yeah, you know.
It's like COVID dinner time. Like,
For real, it's definitely COVID dinner time. But you know, like the job of an artist is to speak to the time that they live in. And I definitely felt, because I have the ability, I know that I know that I can. And not seeing, you know, also being like our age, we're in the same age. I'm 35, I'll be 36 this year. So feeling a little bit of the responsibility, because one, I've been able to experience some success, and that means I have a platform, you know. And there's that was a little bit of a challenge because again, you're just kind of like, okay, how do I say what I'm feeling when I'm not even clear? It's still a little bit of a chaos. That was a little bit of a challenge. That was a hurdle. Um, I think how it comes when it comes um, will be really genuine because I at least kind of was just like, all right, let me just sit my ass down. And if it's not coming, I can't force it, and that actually I think really helped. So starting to find a better rhythm on how to, again, it's really just like, hey, what comes naturally as opposed to
Right.
like, I got to talk about this thing and this happened and we should do this. It's like, nah, nobody wants to hear that either.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like a learning curve for me, like to try to tap into like being like, oh, I have to go into the studio and paint, and being like, no, I don't have to actually. And then having it kind of easing into that feeling I had, back when nobody was looking at my paintings, where it's like, oh, I want to go into the studio. But that took a little bit of time for sure. And then like, I don't know, I feel like we are at kind of an interesting, I don't know, not to brag, but I feel like this is sort of like, if there is a good age for the last year, I feel like being in your mid 30s is kind of one of them, because you're like, I had actually I'd like stopped drinking like at the beginning of March, just for like, I was like, I should just take a month off of drinking. And it was like my birthday. And I just like, was like, I'm going to have leftovers and hang out with my wife at home and watch TV. And then like, that's what the next like 15 months was. But I was already mentally there. I was already like, I'm like, I don't need to go out to everything.
I was gonna say, I was like, I'm married, so in the same way, it was like, yeah, I'm actually okay. Like, this is cool. I wrote a song. I literally wrote a song. Like, the first line is "Let the world crash and burn." I'm down with it. And it's all to say, like, sometimes this is also a line in the song. Sometimes you have to fall back just to move forward. I do think that that's the simplest way of like my perspective on what we're dealing with. But I will say, like, the fact that we're in the same age range, like experiencing life with, at least we have partners, you know what I mean? It's like, we're not.
We've already like kind of like settled a few things. I feel like that's the thing with COVID. It's like, if something was not working, it really shine a light on it. And like, I mean, our country was one of those things. And like, but then people's personal lives, it's like, whatever isn't really working, like, or like, if you're like, oh, my apartment really sucks, but like, it's fine because I go out to eat every night. And then COVID happens and you're like, gotta work on that apartment, gotta learn how to cook. And so I think like, yeah, hopefully, I mean, it's like, it kind of reprioritizes all the noise and being like, actually, like my immediate situation, if I strip it all away, like, what do I have and what do I need?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that, I mean, in many ways, I also had like a lot of sort of like, I don't know, like survivor's guilt, because it was like my first time where I was like, I just bought a house and I was like in Altadena, where I feel like I'm like in the suburbs, and I'm like, this is not how I've experienced any other crisis in my life, like with like birds chirping and stuff, and like, I don't know. So I think that also kind of was like put the fire under me to be like, what are my next steps? Like, what's important to me? Because it can't just be like just being comfortable.
No. And I think also it's like, big shout out to everyone who's single watching.
I know, we're like, oh, our wife is so great.
I know,
Nice.
I know, we kind of did.
Rude.
I know. I felt bad. I was like, oh, I'm not trying to rub it in. But I will say that in gratitude, I think it's like so much in like gratitude and just like for what is, being able to at least go, okay, well, things aren't exactly how we'd like them to be, but there's people who lived through World War I, II, Vietnam, like actual like war, like people and kids who like just turning 18 that didn't get their graduation. I mean, there are times when people were just turning 18 and they were being shipped off to war,
Right.
So it's a trip how we interface with reality that I think in terms of hurdles that actually kind of was really helpful, is to like really just lean into like just the gratitude, the things that are right, because it's plenty, and there will always be plenty of things that are wrong, right?
I mean, that would definitely be like, if I would start to feel like too much like stress and anxiety and like depression around the whole everything, I would just be like, wait, have I been on my phone for the last 6 hours? And I'd like turn it off and then like look out. I found myself like looking at the sky a lot in quarantine, just being like, and like in a lot of my paintings during the last year, like there's a lot of gradients in there because I was thinking about sort of like the gradient of the sky, but then also the gradient of my computer screen, like this very digital space. And I found that like, yeah, it was just always helpful to be like, okay, what actually is happening like right here? And like, there's all these things happening and they're all real, but like also what's the reality when I like don't look at the news?
Yeah, it's real.
And trying to like use that to like regenerate, because also all those things are there. And like, I mean, then I think it is like when you have sort of things to be grateful for and you have support systems in place, it's like, then you do have like that extra energy. And then it's really important to use that extra energy for people that are like going through COVID. Like I think about like all the single parents in COVID and like all the parents period, and then single parents. And I'm like, I don't know how. And it's like that person can't be thinking about the things that like I can think about and like maybe need to like put attention on and like do some hard work, because I'm not trying to like do distance learning with a kid right now.
And it's a trip. It's a trip. Everybody had those like just it was a trippy year. It was a trippy year. And we're here.
Walk away from it and not have learned something. I mean, I think that like, I think it's important to try to see sort of like at least have gratitude for like what we've learned. And even like, if you haven't learned anything because you were too busy trying to raise kids or like hold down a job or like, you know, kind of keep transitioning how your job's going to take shape with different mandates and regulations and stuff. It's like, you know, even still, it's like knowing that like there was this sort of like global learning that's happening right now that hopefully we can do something with.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like we're in that place. I feel like at least there was enough time to see things for what they really are.
Right.
That I've hit rock bottom before, like rock bottom, and it was not it was almost like, you know, the denial of it is worse than the rock bottom. Because
right.
in the denial, I was causing more chaos, not only to myself, but like to the people that I love, you know, like people I actually love. And I feel like we're sort of in this place where it's not right, but we're at least being able to go, yeah, this is not right. We can't pretend, you know, we're not going to pretend. And I think we're just going to see more and more of things right in our face until things start to really change. And that's probably what it's going to require, you know. It's like, because the habit, like cultural habit, you know, it's like, how do you shift the whole human culture? It's going to take lots of reminders, unfortunately, you know, and it's just the growing pains of it. So, you know. Yeah. So I think we kind of veered off, but hopefully
that's but yeah, so the obstacle was all of society.
It's like Earth sucks. Earth is the obstacle.
Yeah, we are the obstacle.
This existence. No.
Well, speaking of gratitude, I think we're running out of time, but I am so grateful to both of you, Christina and Miguel. I want to thank you for all of the amazing work that you do. Everything that you said tonight resonates so profoundly, and I really can't thank you enough for sharing your work with us. And I want to congratulate Miguel on the new EP, Art Dealer Chic, Volume 4, which was literally just released on April 9th, and you can find it on streaming services everywhere. And thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. I'm excited to see the Made in LA show soon, now that themes are open again.
Everyone come to the Hammer and check out our amazing biennial, which is now open until July 25th, Made in LA.
Yay.
I'll see you guys on the couch with our pizza later tonight.
Yeah, right? Where's my pizza? All right, cool.
Bye.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks for
Thank
saying.
you.
Thanks, guys.